Jake Morrison wiped the oil from his hands and stared at the engine bay of the Horizon Runner. 6 years he had worked on this ship, and he knew every bolt, every wire, every system like it was part of his own body. The ship was old but reliable, just the way Jake liked things. He trusted machines that had proven themselves over time. Everything changed 3 months ago when the Valtime made contact with Earth. Jake remembered watching the news broadcasts with the rest of the crew. The aliens were beautiful in a way that seemed impossible. Their bodies looked like living crystal, clear and bright, catching light and throwing rainbows across every surface. They moved like dancers, floating more than walking, their voices like music. They were also the most arrogant beings Jake had ever encountered. The Valtime Empire controlled a large section of the galaxy. They had technology that made human inventions look like children's toys. They had faster ships, better weapons, and medical advances that could cure diseases humanity still struggled with. And they made sure everyone knew it. When Emperor Thalarin offered a cultural exchange program, the human government jumped at the chance. Every human ship that worked in space would receive a Valtime liaison. These liaisons would help humans navigate the complex politics of galactic society. They would teach humans about alien technology. They would bridge the gap between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Captain Lisa Chen had been excited when she heard the Horizon Runner would get a liaison. She was a good captain, fair and smart, and she saw this as an opportunity. The crew would learn from an advanced species. They would gain knowledge that could help all of humanity. Lisa had prepared a welcome ceremony and made sure the ship was spotless. The liaison arrived on a Tuesday morning. Jake was in the cargo bay helping unload supplies when the Valtime transport ship docked. The airlock hissed open and Jake stopped working to watch. He had seen Valtime on video broadcasts but never in person. The being that stepped through the airlock was not what Jake expected. She was Valtime, clearly. Her body had that same crystalline structure, that same alien quality. But where other Valtime Jake had seen were tall and thin, almost fragile-looking, this one was built differently. She was shorter, wider, more solid. Her crystal body was not clear like glass. It was clouded, milky like looking through fog. She did not float. She walked with heavy steps that made sounds on the metal floor. Behind her, a message drone played a holographic recording. Emperor Thalarin appeared, his crystal form perfect and shimmering. His voice was smooth as he spoke. Greetings to the human vessel Horizon Runner. I present to you Princess Vera, my 15th daughter. May she serve you as well as your primitive ship deserves. The hologram vanished. Jake saw Lisa's face turn red with anger. Several crew members muttered insults. The meaning was clear. The Emperor had sent them someone he considered worthless, a joke liaison for a joke species. Vera stood in the cargo bay, her clouded head lowered. She did not speak. She simply waited, like someone used to being insulted and ignored. Her thick fingers gripped the handle of a single bag that held her belongings. Lisa stepped forward, her voice tight with controlled fury. This is unacceptable. I will file a formal complaint with the diplomatic corps. We will send her back and demand a proper liaison. No. Jake surprised himself by speaking up. Everyone turned to look at him. He was just the mechanic, not an officer. He usually kept his opinions to himself during crew matters. Lisa frowned. Jake, the Emperor, clearly sent her as an insult. Yeah, he did. Jake walked closer to Vera. Up close he could see details he had missed. Her crystal body was not just clouded. It was dense, packed with complex internal structures. Her eyes, when she finally looked up at him, were a deep blue color like ocean water. But that's the Emperor's problem, not hers. He turned to Lisa. Captain, we don't send people back just because someone else thinks they're not good enough. That's not who we are. Lisa opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She looked at Vera, really looked at her, and something in her expression softened. You are right. She stepped forward and extended her hand to Vara in the human gesture of greeting. Welcome aboard the Horizon Runner, Princess Vera. I apologize for my initial reaction. Vara stared at Lisa's hand for a long moment. When she finally reached out and clasped it, her grip was strong and solid. Thank you, Captain. And please, just Vara. I am not treated as royalty among my people. There is no need to pretend here. Her voice was not musical like other Valtime. It was deeper, rougher, like stones grinding together. But there was honesty in it that Jake appreciated. Lisa assigned Vara quarters near the crew deck, rather than in the isolated guest section. She introduced Vera to the senior staff and made it clear that the princess was to be treated as a full crew member. Jake watched as Vara moved through the ship over the following days. She was quiet, almost invisible. She attended briefings but rarely spoke. She ate meals alone in her quarters. She walked the corridors during off hours when few people were around. The crew gradually forgot she was there. She became background noise, easy to overlook. Jake noticed because he understood what it felt like to be underestimated. He had grown up poor, worked his way through technical school while everyone told him he should aim for something more respectable than being a grease monkey. He had proven himself through work, not words. He started to nod at Vera when he passed her in the corridors. She nodded back, surprised at first, then accepting. He began eating lunch in the common area at the same time she did, not at her table but nearby. He did not push conversation. He just made his presence steady and predictable. 3 weeks passed. The Horizon Runner followed its regular route, jumping between star systems, delivering cargo, picking up new contracts. Vera performed her liaison duties with quiet efficiency. She filed reports, answered questions about Valtime protocols, and stayed out of everyone's way. Jake found himself watching her sometimes when she thought no one was looking. There was sadness in the way she held herself. Not self-pity, but a deep, worn-down acceptance of rejection. She had been the punchline her entire life. Her father's joke. The daughter who did not fit, who embarrassed the elegant royal family simply by existing. He wondered what it must be like to be born into a society that valued grace and beauty above all else. When your body was built for strength and endurance instead, to be rejected by your own father so completely that he would send you away as an insult to another species. Jake checked the engine readouts on his console and frowned. Something was off with the quantum drive. The new Valtime technology that had been installed as part of the Alliance agreement was showing minor fluctuations. Nothing serious yet, but worth monitoring. He made a note in the maintenance log and went back to his regular duties. The fluctuations were probably just calibration issues. They would settle down. He had no idea that in 2 days those fluctuations would become a disaster that would change everything. The alarms woke Jake from a dead sleep. Red emergency lights flooded his quarters as the ship's computer announced a critical failure in the engine room. He was dressed and running down the corridor in less than 30 seconds. Years of training and experience made his body move on automatic while his mind tried to catch up. Chris Parker was already in the engine room when Jake arrived. The younger engineer stood in front of the quantum drive's main console, his face pale as he stared at the cascading error messages flooding the screens. Smoke drifted from one of the access panels. What happened? Jake demanded, already pulling on protective gloves and moving toward the drive core. I don't know. Chris's voice shook slightly. I was running standard diagnostics. Everything was normal. Then the whole system just started falling apart. The quantum drive is rejecting every command I give it. Jake looked at the readings and felt his stomach drop. The quantum drive was not just malfunctioning. It was actively destroying itself. The harmonic frequencies that powered the faster-than-light travel were becoming unstable, feeding back into the system, creating a loop that was tearing the delicate crystalline matrices apart. Captain Lisa arrived with half the senior staff behind her. Report. The quantum drive is failing, Jake said, his hands already working to bypass damaged systems and isolate the worst of the feedback loops. If we can't stop it, we will be stranded. The backup conventional drives can keep us alive, but we will be months from the nearest station instead of days. Can you fix it? Lisa's voice was calm, but Jake heard the tension underneath. I don't know. Jake had never said those words about an engine before. He could fix anything human-made. He had repaired drives that other engineers had declared dead. But this was different. This was alien technology, built on principles he barely understood. I'll try. The next 72 hours blurred together. Jake barely left the engine room. Chris brought him food that he forgot to eat and coffee that went cold before he remembered to drink it. He took apart systems, studied the Valtime technical manuals, ran simulation after simulation. Nothing worked. The problem was fundamental. The quantum drive was designed by the Valtime for Valtime ships. It operated on harmonic resonance, using crystalline matrices that responded to specific frequency patterns. Human ships were built differently. Human power systems generated different kinds of energy. The interface between the two technologies had seemed stable during testing, but under the stress of regular use, the incompatibilities were showing. It was like trying to make a violin string vibrate in tune with a drum. The fundamental natures were too different. Other crew members tried to help. Chris worked until he collapsed from exhaustion. The ship's computer specialist spent hours trying to rewrite the control software. The science officer analyzed the crystalline structures under every instrument they had. Nothing helped. On the fourth day, with life support starting to show strain from the damaged power systems, Jake admitted defeat. He sat on the engine room floor, surrounded by tools and broken components, and stared at the flickering holographic diagrams floating in the air. The quantum drive was a beautiful piece of engineering. The way the crystalline matrices channeled energy, the elegant mathematics of the harmonic frequencies, the sheer artistic grace of the design, it was impressive. It was also completely useless to him. Jake heard footsteps behind him but did not turn around. Probably Chris coming to check on him again. Or maybe Lisa coming to ask for a final status report before they accepted being stranded. You are approaching this wrong. The voice was not Chris or Lisa. It was rough and deep, like grinding stones. Vara's voice. Jake looked up. The Valtime princess stood in the doorway of the engine room. He had not seen her since the crisis started. She had kept to her quarters, staying out of the way like always. Now she stepped into the room, her heavy footsteps steady on the metal floor. What do you mean? Jake was too tired to be polite, too frustrated to care about diplomatic niceties. Vara moved closer. She did not float like her elegant relatives. She walked, and each step was deliberate and grounded. You think like a human, linear, mechanical. You see the drive as a machine with parts that must work together in a specific order. That is what it is, Jake said. No. Vara knelt beside him, and Jake noticed something he had missed before. When other Valtime moved, they seemed to barely touch physical objects. They were light, almost ethereal. Vara was different. When her thick fingers touched the damaged quantum drive casing, she did not just touch it. She felt it. Her solid, dense body connected with the machine in a way her graceful siblings never could. The quantum drive is designed by artists, Vara said. My people do not see technology as function. They see it as an extension of beauty. They design systems to be elegant, to be graceful, to be pleasing to the eye and the mind. They create these beautiful designs and then declare them finished. She opened an access panel with practiced ease. Her hands moved with certainty, finding latches and connections without having to search for them. But someone has to actually build these beautiful designs. Someone has to make them work in the real world, with real materials and real physics. That work is considered beneath the elegant ones, so it is given to others. Jake watched as she examined the quantum drive's internal components. Others like you? Yes. Vara did not look at him. Her attention stayed on the machine. I was born wrong for a Valtime. Too heavy, too solid, too much like your kind. I could not dance through the air. I could not speak in musical tones. I embarrassed my father simply by existing. So he sent me away to work with the lower castes. The builders, the ones who take the elegant designs and make them actually function. She traced a finger along one of the crystalline matrices, and it glowed faintly at her touch. I have spent my whole life building and repairing quantum drives. I know every way they can fail because I have fixed every failure. The elegant designers never stay to see how their beautiful creations break. They do not care. But I care because when something breaks, I am the one who must fix it. Jake felt something shift in his understanding. He had been trying to understand the quantum drive as a human engineer, looking for logic and mechanical function. But the drive was not built that way. It was built by artists who cared about beauty first and function second. The technical manuals he had been studying were written by those same artists, full of flowery language about harmony and resonance and aesthetic principles. Vara understood the drive differently. She understood it as a builder, as someone who worked with her hands and dealt with the messy reality of making things actually work. Can you fix it? Jake asked. Vara was quiet for a long moment. Not alone. I understand the drive, but I do not understand human systems. I know what needs to change, but not how to make those changes work with your technology. She finally looked at him, her deep blue eyes meeting his. But if we work together, perhaps. You know, human engineering. I know Valtime construction. Together we might find a solution. Jake stood up, feeling energy return to his exhausted body. Tell me what you need. Vara stood as well. First, I need you to stop thinking of the drive as a machine. It does not work like a machine. It works like a living thing, responding to energy patterns the way a plant responds to sunlight. She began to explain, and for the first time, Jake started to truly understand the quantum drive, not as an elegant work of art, but as a practical system that could be modified, adjusted, and made compatible with human technology. Vara spoke in builder's terms and practical language about stress points and energy flows and material properties. They worked through the night. Jake's hands built while Vera's knowledge guided. The rest of the crew stayed away, sensing that something important was happening in the engine room. Jake had never worked with anyone the way he worked with Vera. In his years as a mechanic, he had trained dozens of apprentices and collaborated with countless engineers. But this was different. This was two completely different ways of thinking combining to create something neither could achieve alone. Vara explained the quantum drive in terms that finally made sense to Jake. The crystalline matrices were not just components. They were resonators, like musical instruments, each one tuned to specific frequencies. When energy flowed through them in the right patterns, they created a field that let the ship slip between normal space and quantum space. The problem was that the matrices were tuned for volatile energy signatures. The elegant designers had created them to work with the pure, clear crystal that made up volatile technology. They had never considered that other species might use different materials, different energy sources, different approaches. Why did no one catch this during testing? Jake asked as he carefully removed one of the damaged matrices. The crystal was warm to the touch and hummed faintly even though it was broken. They did, Vara said. She was working on another section of the drive, her thick fingers moving with surprising delicacy as she realigned components. The test pilots reported issues, but the designers dismissed them. They said the problems were caused by improper use, by human error, by failure to appreciate the elegant nature of the design. Jake snorted. Of course they did. The designers never believe there are flaws in their creations, Vara continued. To admit a flaw would be to admit their art is imperfect. So they blame the users instead. She paused, then added quietly, I tried to tell them. I wrote reports explaining the incompatibility issues. I suggested modifications that would make the drives more stable for human use. Let me guess. They ignored you. Worse, they reprimanded me for questioning the design of my betters. Vera's voice carried old anger. The lead designer said I was too simple to understand true elegance, that my dense, crude nature made me blind to beauty. Jake looked at her. In the dim light of the engine room, her clouded crystal body did not look flawed. It looked solid, real, trustworthy. Their loss is our gain. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Jake found himself explaining human engineering principles, and Vara listened with the same careful attention she gave everything. She asked good questions, the kind that showed she understood not just what Jake was saying, but why it mattered. Human technology is very different from ours, Vara observed. You build for durability and function. You expect things to break and design them to be repaired. My people build for beauty and expect perfection. Nothing is perfect, Jake said. Everything breaks eventually. The question is whether you can fix it when it does. Yes. Vara sounded pleased. That is what I have always believed. But I am alone in that belief among my people. Hours passed. Jake lost track of time as he worked. The engine room became their entire world. Just the two of them and the broken quantum drive and the slowly growing solution to an impossible problem. The key insight came from Vara's own experience. As a heavy, dense volatile, she had never fit the standard specifications. The crystalline matrices that worked perfectly for her elegant siblings had always failed when she tried to use them. The builders she worked with had to create modified versions, tuned to different frequencies, responsive to her different energy signature. Those same modifications could adapt the quantum drive to human technology. It is ironic, Vara said as she showed Jake how to retune a matrix. The very thing that made me a failure among my people is what makes this possible. If I were elegant like my sisters, I would not know how to do this. Jake carefully adjusted the harmonic frequency of the matrix he was working on, following Vera's instructions. The crystal began to glow with a steady blue light instead of the flickering red it had shown before. Sometimes being different is exactly what the situation needs. I have spent my life believing I was broken, Vara said softly, that something was wrong with me because I did not match what my people valued. My father made sure I knew I was an embarrassment. My siblings avoided me. The elegant ones treated me like I was invisible unless they needed something built or repaired. They are fools, Jake said bluntly. You are more valuable than all of them combined. Vara turned to look at him, surprise clear in her blue eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. Jake set down his tools and met her gaze. I know you are honest. You did not complain when you were sent here as an insult. You did not demand special treatment or make excuses. You just quietly did your job and stayed out of the way, even though it must have hurt. He gestured at the quantum drive. And I know you are brilliant. You understood this problem in minutes when I had been working on it for days. You know how to build things, how to make them work in the real world instead of just on paper. That is a rare gift. Vara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was rough with emotion. Thank you. You're the first person who has ever said such things to me. Then everyone else is blind. Jake went back to work, giving her space to compose herself. Now show me how to install these modified matrices. They worked through the night and into the next day. Lisa brought them food and water, watching in amazement as the impossible repair took shape. Other crew members stopped by to offer help, and Vara directed them with growing confidence. She was no longer the invisible princess lurking in the background. She was the expert everyone turned to for guidance. Chris worked alongside them, taking notes and asking questions. He was learning more about quantum drive technology in one day than months of studying the official manuals had taught him. Vara explained concepts in clear, practical terms that any engineer could understand. Why are the official manuals so different from how you explain things? Chris asked at one point. Vara made a sound that might have been a laugh. Because the manuals are written by designers who have never built anything with their own hands. They describe the theory, the art, the elegant principles, but they do not describe how things actually work because they do not know. Jake caught Vara's eye and grinned. She grinned back, and for the first time since boarding the ship, she looked truly happy. The solution they created was not elegant. It was practical, functional, and definitely not beautiful by Valtime standards. They had to add interface buffers between the human power systems and the Valtime quantum drive. They installed modified crystalline matrices that could handle both human and Valtime energy signatures. They rewired core systems and recalibrated harmonic frequencies. It was messy, improvised, and absolutely perfect. On the 5th day, with life support down to 40%, and the crew preparing for the possibility of long-term survival in dead space, Jake and Vara stood before the quantum drive control panel. Ready? Jake asked. Ready, Vara confirmed. Jake pressed the activation sequence. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the quantum drive hummed to life. The sound was different from before, deeper and steadier. The crystalline matrices glowed with a strong blue light. The error messages that had flooded the screens were gone, replaced by steady green status indicators. The drive held. The cascading failures stopped. The Horizon Runner was no longer stranded. The crew erupted in cheers. Lisa hugged Jake, then surprised everyone by hugging Vara as well. Chris started crying with relief. The celebration spread through the ship as word reached every deck that they were saved. Jake looked at Vara. She stood in the center of the engine room, surrounded by celebrating crew members, and the expression on her clouded face was wonder. Pure, simple wonder. For the first time in her life, she was not the embarrassment. She was the hero. News traveled fast in space. Within a week, every human ship in the sector knew about the Horizon Runner's quantum drive failure and the miracle repair. Within 2 weeks, the story had spread to Earth and the outer colonies. Within a month, it had reached other alien species. The official report was simple. Princess Vara of the Valtime Empire, working with human mechanic Jake Morrison, had successfully modified Valtime quantum drive technology to be fully compatible with human ships. The modification was stable, replicable, and solved a critical safety issue that had been threatening the entire human Valtime alliance. What the official report did not mention was how the human crew of the Horizon Runner had started treating Vara. She was no longer the quiet, overlooked liaison. She was one of them. She ate meals in the common area, sitting with Jake and Chris and the other engineers. She joined in game nights and movie watches. She told stories about growing up in the Valtime court, and the crew listened with fascination. Jake noticed the change in her most of all. She stood straighter now. She spoke up during briefings, offering insights and suggestions. She smiled more often, and when she did, Her clouded crystal face caught the light, in ways that were uniquely beautiful. The first request for help came from the cargo hauler Northern Star. Their quantum drive was showing the same early warning signs that the Horizon Runner had experienced. Captain Lisa received the message and immediately forwarded it to Vera. "They are asking if you would be willing to consult," Lisa said. "I told them your time is valuable and they would need to compensate you properly." Vera looked surprised. "Compensate me? I am a liaison. This is my duty." "No," Lisa said firmly. "This is specialized knowledge that saves lives and ships. You deserve to be paid for your expertise." Jake was working nearby and spoke up. "The captain is right. What you know is valuable, Vara. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." Vara agreed to help the Northern Star, and Jake volunteered to go with her. Lisa approved the temporary assignment, and 2 days later they took a shuttle to rendezvous with the cargo hauler. The Northern Star's captain was a gruff man named Barry Stone. He looked skeptical when he saw Vara step off the shuttle. Jake could tell Barry was seeing what everyone saw first: the heavy, clouded Valtime who did not match the elegant image most people had of the species. "You are the expert?" Barry asked, not bothering to hide his doubt. "She is," Jake said before Vera could respond. His tone made it clear that questioning her credentials was not acceptable. Barry's skepticism lasted exactly 15 minutes. That was how long it took Vera to diagnose the Northern Star's quantum drive problems, explain what was happening in terms Barry could understand, and outline the solution. By the end of that first hour, Barry was following Vera around like a student with a beloved teacher, asking questions and taking notes. The repair took 3 days. Jake and Vara worked together with the Northern Star's engineering team, implementing the same modifications they had developed on the Horizon Runner. Jake handled the human systems while Vera managed the Valtime technology. They moved together like a practiced team, anticipating what the other needed, communicating with looks and brief words. When the job was done and the quantum drive was running smoothly, Barry paid them twice what they had agreed on. "Worth every credit," he said, shaking both their hands. "You saved my ship and my crew." More requests came in. The patrol ship Desert Wind needed help. The research vessel Deep Sky wanted Vera to review their quantum drive installation before they left on a long expedition. The Colony Transport New Haven asked if Vara could train their engineers on proper maintenance procedures for Valtime. Technology Vara and Jake took as many jobs as they could while still fulfilling their duties on the Horizon Runner. Lisa supported them fully, adjusting schedules and routes to accommodate the consulting work. The rest of the crew was proud to have Vara on their ship, bragging about her to other crews they encountered. Jake watched Vara transform over those months. The quiet, resigned princess who had arrived as an insult became confident and self-assured. She developed a reputation as the foremost expert on human Valtime technology integration. Engineers across the human fleet knew her name and respected her knowledge. But it was not just her professional reputation that grew. The crew of the Horizon Runner saw her as family now. When her birthday came around, they threw her a surprise party. Vara had no idea what to make of the cake or the wrapped gifts or the enthusiastic singing, but she cried happy tears and thanked everyone multiple times. Jake gave her a toolkit he had assembled himself, each tool carefully selected and customized. "For all the repairs ahead of us," he said. Vara held the toolkit like it was made of precious metal. "This is the best gift anyone has ever given me," she said quietly. "Thank you, Jake, for everything. You gave me more than tools or work. You gave me a place where I belong." The work was rewarding, but it was not without challenges. Some humans were suspicious of Vara simply because she was Valtime. Some saw her heavy build and clouded form and assumed she was inferior. But Jake had no patience for prejudice. He made it very clear to anyone who would listen that Vara was his partner, and anyone who disrespected her would answer to him. Most people quickly learned that respect was the only acceptable response. Vara proved her worth on every job. She was patient with those willing to learn, firm with those who tried to take shortcuts, and absolutely brilliant at solving problems everyone else found impossible. 6 months after the initial quantum drive crisis, the Horizon Runner received an interesting message. The Keslan Trade Hub was hosting major negotiations between humanity and several alien species, including the Valtime Empire. Emperor Thalarin himself would be attending, All human liaison officers were requested to attend as part of the delegation. Lisa called Vera and Jake to her office. "The diplomatic corps wants you there," she told Vara. "They have made it clear that your expertise has been crucial to the success of the Human-Valtime Alliance. They want you presented as an example of successful cooperation." Vera's expression was hard to read. "My father will be there." "Yes," Lisa said gently. "Will that be a problem?" "No." Vara straightened her shoulders. "I am not the same person he sent away as a joke. I have nothing to be ashamed of." Jake spoke up. "I am going with you." "You do not have to," Vara said. "I know. I want to." Jake grinned. "Besides, someone needs to make sure those diplomatic types do not try to take credit for your work." Lisa smiled. "Actually, Jake, you are officially requested to attend as well. The report specifically mentions your partnership with Vara. Apparently, the human-Valtime working relationship is exactly what the Alliance is supposed to be about. The journey to the Keslan trade hub took 2 weeks. The hub was massive, a city-sized station floating in neutral space. Ships from dozens of species docked there. Jake had never seen so many different types of aliens in one place. There were insectoid Keslan with their chittering voices, massive Derniks who communicated through color changes, tiny Bryn who moved in coordinated swarms, and many others. The Valtime delegation arrived in a fleet of pristine white ships that looked more like sculptures than spacecraft. Jake watched from the observation deck as Emperor Thaloran's flagship docked. The Emperor emerged surrounded by his most elegant children, each one a perfect example of Valtime grace and beauty. Vera stood beside Jake, watching her family from a distance. Her hands were steady, but Jake could sense the tension in her. "You are better than all of them," Jake said quietly. "Remember that." Vara nodded but said nothing. The formal negotiations would begin the next day. Jake knew that when Vara faced her father again, everything would change. The Emperor had sent her away expecting her to fail, to confirm his belief that she was worthless. Instead, she had become exactly what humanity needed. And now the whole galaxy would know it. The main negotiation hall of the Keslan trade hub was designed to impress. The ceiling stretched up 3 stories. Transparent walls showed the stars beyond, and the floor was polished to a mirror shine. Representatives from 24 species filled the tiered seating, each delegation in their designated area. The human delegation sat in the middle tier. Captain Lisa led the group, flanked by senior diplomats and military advisors. Vara stood with them, wearing a simple uniform that marked her as crew of the Horizon Runner. Jake stood beside her, his mechanic's jumpsuit cleaned and pressed for the occasion but still clearly work clothing. Some of the diplomats had suggested he wear something more formal, but Lisa had shut that down immediately. "Jake represents exactly what this alliance is about," Lisa had said. "Practical people doing real work. He stays as he is." The Valtime delegation entered last and the room fell silent. Emperor Thaloran led them, his crystal body so clear and perfect that he seemed to glow with inner light. Behind him came his children, each one carefully chosen to display Valtime beauty and grace. They floated more than walked, their movements choreographed to appear effortless. Jake felt Vera tense beside him as her father took his position at the high tier reserved for the most powerful delegations. Thaloran's gaze swept across the room, passing over the human section without seeming to notice his 15th daughter standing there. The negotiations began with formal speeches and diplomatic pleasantries. Jake tried to pay attention but found his mind wandering. This was not his world. He was more comfortable with engines and tools than politics and protocols. He glanced at Vara and saw her watching her father with an unreadable expression. The real discussion started after lunch. Trade agreements, technology sharing, territorial boundaries, all the complex details of building an alliance between species. The human representatives presented their case well, but Jake noticed something. The Valtime delegation was dismissive. They made subtle gestures that other species seemed to understand as signs of superiority. They spoke in flowery language that sounded impressive but said very little. Then the topic shifted to technology integration, and everything changed. One of the human diplomats stood up. "We would like to acknowledge a major achievement in human-Valtime cooperation. The quantum drive compatibility issue that threatened our alliance has been solved through the dedicated work of Princess Vera, of the Valtime Empire, and Jake Morrison of Earth." Murmurs spread through the hall. Several species representatives leaned forward with interest. Technology sharing was always a sensitive topic, and successful integration was rare. The diplomat continued. Princess Vara identified fundamental flaws in the original quantum drive design that the creators had overlooked. Working with our engineers, she developed modifications that make the drive safe and stable for human use. This achievement has saved countless lives and made the alliance possible. Jake felt every eye in the room turn toward their section. Vara stood up slowly and Jake stood with her. He saw her father's crystal face shimmer with what might have been surprise or might have been anger. Would Princess Vara care to present her findings? The diplomat asked. Vara walked to the presentation area, her heavy footsteps echoing in the silent hall. Jake followed her, taking his place beside her as she activated the holographic display system. The quantum drive schematics appeared in the air, rotating slowly. The quantum drive is a masterpiece of design, Vara began, her grinding stone voice carrying clearly through the hall. It is beautiful, elegant, and impressive to observe. It is also fundamentally flawed for use by species other than the Valtime. A ripple of shock went through the Valtime delegation. One of her sisters, slender and graceful, started to rise in protest, but Emperor Thaloran raised a hand to stop her. Vara continued, unbothered by the reaction. The designers created these drives to work with Valtime energy signatures and materials. They never considered that other species might have different needs. When problems arose during testing, they blamed user error rather than examining their design. She manipulated the holographic display, showing the modifications she and Jake had developed. The solution required understanding not just the theory, but the practical reality of how the drives function. It required knowledge of construction and maintenance, areas that elegant designers consider beneath them. Jake watched Thaloran as Vara spoke. The Emperor's perfect form had gone very still. He was listening now, really listening, perhaps for the first time in his life, to what his 15th daughter had to say. My partner, Jake Morrison, brought human engineering principles, Vara said, gesturing to Jake. Durability, redundancy, repairability. I brought knowledge of Valtime construction techniques. Together we created a hybrid system that serves both species better than either pure design could. She went into technical details, and Jake saw engineers from other species taking rapid notes. The quantum drive modifications were not just useful for humans. Any species that wanted to integrate Valtime technology could benefit from this knowledge. When Vara finished her presentation, the hall was quiet for a long moment. Then applause began, starting with the human delegation and spreading to other species. The Valtime delegation did not applaud, but they did not protest either. They simply sat in stunned silence. The chief Keslan negotiator stood up, their antennae twitching with what Jake had learned was their version of enthusiasm. This is an excellent example of successful alliance building. Princess Vara, would you be willing to serve as a consultant for other species seeking to integrate Valtime technology? Yes, Vara said without hesitation. That is my purpose. To build bridges between my people and others. More questions followed. Other delegations wanted to know about the modification process, about training opportunities, about whether Vara could help with their own technology integration challenges. Jake watched his partner handle each question with confidence and clarity. This was not the quiet, overlooked princess who had arrived on the Horizon Runner 6 months ago. This was an expert, a leader, someone who commanded respect through knowledge and capability. Finally, Emperor Thaloran stood. The room fell silent immediately. His voice was musical and commanding. Daughter, Vara turned to face him, her chin up, her posture straight. Father, I sent you to the humans expecting you to fail, Thaloran said. There was no apology in his voice, but there was something else. Acknowledgement, perhaps. I saw you as an embarrassment, a flaw in the perfect image of our family. I was wrong. The admission sent shockwaves through the Valtime delegation. Emperors did not admit mistakes. It simply was not done, Thaloran continued. You have achieved something that all my elegant children with all their grace and beauty could not. You have built a functional bridge between species. You have taken our technology and made it better, more practical, more useful. You have earned respect through work rather than birth. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. You are the daughter I should have valued all along. Vara said nothing for a long moment. Jake could see emotions playing across her clouded crystal face. Pain, anger, hope, uncertainty. Finally she spoke. I am not seeking your approval, Father. I spent my whole life wanting it, trying to earn it, believing I was broken because I did not have it. But I have learned something among the humans. My worth is not determined by whether I match your standards of beauty. It is determined by what I can do, by the problems I can solve, by the people I can help. She gestured to Jake and the rest of the human delegation. These people saw value in me when you saw only shame. They gave me the opportunity you never did. So while I appreciate your words, I no longer need them. I know who I am now. The hall was completely silent. Jake had never been prouder of anyone in his life. Vara had not just stood up to her father. She had declared her independence from his judgment entirely. Thalarin looked at his daughter for a long time. Then slowly, he did something no one in the hall had ever seen an emperor do. He bowed, not deeply but enough. A gesture of respect between equals. Then I will say only this, Thalarin said. The Valtime Empire is fortunate that humanity saw what I was too blind to see. Perhaps there is much we can learn from your practical approach to value. The negotiations continued, but the tone had shifted. The Valtime delegation was less dismissive, more willing to engage seriously with human proposals. Other species took note. By the time the formal sessions ended 3 days later, the Human-Valtime alliance was on much stronger footing than anyone had expected. On the final evening, Jake and Vera stood at one of the observation decks, watching ships come and go from the massive station. Tomorrow they would return to the Horizon Runner and resume their normal duties. But nothing would truly be normal again. What happens now? Jake asked. We keep working, Vera said. There are many ships that need quantum drive modifications. Many engineers who need training. Much work to be done. She turned to look at him. You will continue to be my partner? Of course, Jake said. You think I'm going to miss out on all the interesting problems? Besides, someone has to make sure you remember to eat during long repair jobs. Vara laughed. That chiming stone sound that Jake had grown to love. And someone has to make sure you do not take apart more systems than necessary just to see how they work. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Jake thought about the day Vera had arrived on the Horizon Runner, heavy and overlooked, sent as an insult by an emperor who saw her as worthless. He thought about how wrong that assessment had been, how blind Thalarin had been to the value of his own daughter. Your father said humanity saw what he could not, Jake said eventually. But that is not quite right. We did not see anything special at first. We just treated you like a person instead of a joke. You did the rest yourself. You stood up for me when I could not stand up for myself, Vera said softly. You gave me the chance to prove my worth. That is everything. No, Jake corrected. You always had worth. I just gave you a place where you could show it. Vera was quiet for a moment, then said, The Emperor sent his fat daughter as a joke. But the joke was on him, because I was exactly who you needed. Jake grinned. Exactly who we needed. And now the whole galaxy knows it. They returned to the Horizon Runner the next morning. The crew welcomed them back with cheers and congratulations. Lisa had already scheduled their next consulting job, another ship with quantum drive troubles. Chris had prepared the tools and materials they would need. Everything was ready for the next challenge. Jake and Vara went to the engine room, their workspace, the place where they had first truly worked together. They checked the quantum drive, running diagnostics and reviewing maintenance logs. The modified system was running perfectly, exactly as designed. Ready for the next job? Jake asked. Always, Vera replied. And together, the human mechanic and the Emperor's rejected daughter went to fix another impossible problem, proving once again that the best solutions come from those who work with their hands, not from those who only appreciate beauty from a distance. The galaxy was full of broken things waiting to be fixed, and they were just getting started.